Hello barbarians, welcome to Gamertopia. For Season 3 I've decided to go with the Barbarian class to start, and so far it's been a ton of fun. So for today I'm going to go over the leveling build that I used. I was able to get into World Tier 4 in just a few hours with this build, and it really helped maximize time efficiency with the amount of XP I was able to get. Before I start going over the build, if you end up using this build or are looking for more Diablo content, make sure to subscribe to my channel. It helps me out a lot and will keep you up to date with all my future videos. Alright, let's get on with the build. To start, we are going to be using Lunging Strike with Advanced and Battle Lunging Strike. Enhanced Lunging Strike is going to give us a 30% increase in damage to our basic skill and also heals us for 2% of our health when we use it against an enemy who is healthy. Battle Lunging Strike is going to make our basic attack cause bleeding damage as well. For the core tree, we will be using Upheaval, and I would probably start with just one rank while you are leveling, but we'll end up coming back to this and maxing it out. We'll also be using Enhanced and Furious Upheaval. Enhanced Upheaval is going to give us a 20% chance to stun enemies for 2.5 seconds, and Furious Upheaval is going to let all skills other than Upheaval to cause your next cast of Upheaval to do 12% multiplicative damage and stacking up to 6 times, which would be 72%. This is a massive boost and will really help with melting down all enemies in your path. Now we'll max out the Endless Fury passive to give us a 21% increase in Fury generation when we're using a two-handed weapon. We're pretty much always going to be using a two-handed weapon, so this should be a constant effect. Now we'll go down to our defensive skill and take one rank of Ground Stomp to give us a stunning ability, and we'll also take Enhanced Ground Stomp and Tactical Ground Stomp. Enhanced Ground Stomp is going to increase the stun time by 1 second, and Tactical Ground Stomp will generate 40 Fury whenever we use the skill. Next we'll take one rank of Rallying Cry with Enhanced and Tactical Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry is going to increase our movement speed and resource generation while it's active, and it will also give any surrounding allies the buff for a shorter duration as well. Enhanced Rallying Cry will give us Unstoppable while the skill is active, and this will also give us a skill to break any CC that we might be taken by. Tactical Rallying Cry will increase the resource generation of this ability and also will let the ability immediately give us 20 Fury when it is used. Next we'll max out Imposing Presence and Martial Vigor, which will give us an 18% increased health and 12% damage reduction against elites respectively. For the Brawling Tree, we're going to start off with one rank of Warcry with Enhanced Warcry and Power Warcry. This is going to give us a 15% multiplicative increase in our damage output. Enhanced Warcry will give us Berserking for 4 seconds when we use the skill. Berserking gives us a 25% multiplicative damage output increase and also a 15% additive movement speed increase. Power Warcry will give us an additional 10% multiplicative damage output when we use the skill with 6 or more enemies nearby. Next we'll take one rank of Charge with Enhanced and Power Charge. Charge is a super fun skill to use. You basically run forward towards an enemy and baseball swing your weapon at them. With Enhanced Charge, if you knock them back into any kind of terrain, they take additional damage and will be stunned. Power Charge reduces the cooldown of the skill by 3 seconds for each enemy you hit, and this stacks up to 9 seconds. At this point I would now return to the core skill tree and max out Upheaval, which will give us a massive boost of damage for the skill. Then return to the Brawling skill tree and max out Charge. These are your two big damage skills, so we're going to want to get the damage numbers as high as possible. Continuing on through the Brawling tree, we're going to use a few passives here. Max out Swiftness for 12% increase to movement speed. Then we'll be maxing out all 3 of the passives. We have Booming Voice, which increases our shout skill duration by 24%, Guttural Yell, which causes nearby enemies to do 12% less damage for 5 seconds, and then Raid Leader, which says it causes your shouts to heal allies by 3% of their health per second, which is true, but it also heals you for that amount as well. This is super nice to have for leveling because it helps keep your health high and you don't have to worry about dying much. Now we'll head down to the Weapon Mastery tree and we'll be taking a few passives. We'll start with maxing out Pit Fighter, which will give us a 9% increased damage to close enemies and 6% damage reduction from distant enemies. Then we'll go down to the bottom of the tree and max out Thick Skin and Counter Offensive. Thick Skin is going to give us 1.1% of our max health as Fortify anytime we take direct damage, and Counter Offensive is going to give us 12% multiplicative damage increase while our Fortify is over 50%. I did end up having an extra point with this build, which I ended up putting here in Defensive Stance. This gives us a 2% increase to damage reduction while fortified, but it is kind of just a freebie, so if you feel it's better somewhere else, this point in Defensive Stance isn't super important. We're not using any ultimate skills or any of the passives here, so we can skip that tree and go to the key passive. For the key passive, I've been using Unbridled Rage, but I honestly have been pretty torn about which one to use. Unbridled Rage has been most useful one for me currently, but I may end up changing this later on. I'll certainly let everyone know if I do. I'm not going to go over the the Paragon board too much because it really isn't too important for leveling, but I'll show you what I've done so far. On the starting board, I made sure to grab all the rare notes, and I'm using Imbiber currently since I spent a lot of time in the healthy range. It's giving me a little boost in damage most of the time. I haven't been running too many Nightmare dungeons yet, so I have a lot of glyph leveling left to do. Next, I have the Weapons Master board, which I'm just using for the glyph slot, and I currently have the Martial glyph here. This is giving me a boost to the armor and physical damage done from the magic nodes here. I also took the Iron Strength and Raw Power nodes on this board. Next, I have the Warbringer board, which again, I'm just using for the glyph socket. I have the Might glyph here, which is giving us an 8% multiplicative damage increase when wielding a two-handed weapon, which is always, and it's also giving me a small increase to physical damage and elemental resistances. Lastly, I have the Blood Rage board with the Ire glyph, which is giving me a damage increase while berserking. These are not anything I would necessarily follow though, because I'm definitely planning on changing them. Just go with whatever is going to help you out most while you are leveling. For the expertise, I would just switch it back and forth to whatever you're using at that time to make sure you're getting some sort of added benefit. Since you are constantly upgrading your weapons while you're leveling, this will likely change often. I found that I ended up using two-handed mace and two-handed swords most often. The two-handed sword buff is my personal favorite since it gives a 30% increase to the bleed damage you do after you kill an enemy. As far as gear goes, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just keep making sure that your armor and your damage output is as high as possible. If you can, go for ranks of charge and ranks of upheaval, and then other than that, armor percentage and health are always good. Now we'll go over the construct. If you're watching this outside of Season 3, you can skip this next part. For the first governing stone, we're going to be using Flash of Adrenaline, which gives us a multiplicative damage increase whenever that skill is cast. For tuning stones, I'm using Fortify support, which gives us a small amount of Fortify when the skill is cast. Safeguard support, which gives us a bit of damage reduction percentage when the skill is cast, and then also gripping support, which pulls distant enemies to the construct whenever the skill is cast. The second governing stone I'm using is Tempest, which damages an enemy and it pulses to 3 surrounding enemies for 5 seconds. This works best when the gripping support pulls enemies together, because if it kills an enemy, it's also going to spread with increased damage and time. The tuning support stones I'm using with this are the Registered Damage support, which causes the enemy to explode and cause damage to nearby enemies if it's killed with the skill. Mockery support, which taunts enemies, and Arcing support, which increases the amount of enemies the skill can hit. As for leveling, I went through the Season 3 campaign and then did some of the seasonal activities until about level 30. You can continue with the seasonal activities if you're having fun with them, and it's probably even more effective way to level since you'll also be gaining new governing and tuning stones from it. But if you're looking for speed, head to Domain Tunnels and clear out the first room on repeat. This is the quickest way to level early on in the game. Regardless of how you do it, once you get to about level 40, you should be able to clear out the first capstone dungeon. Once you're in World Tier 3, I would cycle through doing seasonal events, world bosses, legions, and nightmare dungeons until you get to about level 55, maybe 60, where then you should be able to clear out the last capstone dungeon and get into World Tier 4. I hope this video helps you with leveling in Season 3. Let me know what you think of the season so far in the comments, and keep tuned for more videos coming soon.